The first thing I noticed was the empty chair. It sat in the front row, second from the aisle, with a white ribbon tied to its back. It was supposed to be for my mother. She was supposed to sit there, smile too wide, dab at her eyes, and later tell everyone how proud she was. Instead, the chair stayed empty while the guests whispered and glanced over their shoulders, waiting for someone who was clearly not coming. That was when I understood something was wrong. I was already in my wedding dress, standing just behind the doors of the old Lakeside Chapel in Port Elms, Michigan. My bouquet felt heavier than it should have, and the fabric of the dress pulled at my shoulders as if it wanted to slide off. The music was playing. The officiant had taken his place. My fiancé, Aaron Whitmore, stood at the altar with his hands folded, trying not to look back too often. My phone vibrated in my hand. I didn't want to look. I already knew who it would be. When I did, the message was short. "We're at your sister's. We'll explain later. Don't make this a scene. No apology, no urgency, just instruction. My name is Claire Holloway." I was 31 years old that day, and that message was the moment my life split cleanly in two. The doors opened, people turned, I walked anyway. I walked down the aisle alone, past faces that softened into pity, past friends who tried to smile through confusion, past an empty chair that felt louder than any argument ever could. I didn't cry, I didn't hesitate. I didn't look to see if anyone had changed their mind at the last second. I already knew they wouldn't. Later, people would tell me how composed I looked, how strong, how graceful. They would say things like, "You handled it beautifully," as if grace were a choice and not something you're forced into when breaking down would only humiliate you further. The ceremony ended. People clapped. Aaron kissed my cheek and whispered, "We'll talk later," like this was just another small misunderstanding. But it wasn't. While I stood there answering polite questions and accepting tight hugs, my parents were 2 miles away, packed into my younger sister Lily's townhouse, eating catered barbecue and celebrating her engagement announcement that had been planned in secret for weeks. I found that out later. For now, all I knew was that my own wedding had been treated like a scheduling conflict. That night, after the guests left and the lights dimmed, I sat alone in the passenger seat of my car, still in my dress, watching the lake reflect the parking lot lamps. Aaron had offered to drive. I told him I needed a minute. He understood in the quiet way that mattered. The minute turned into hours. At 5:12 a.m., my phone rang. It was my father, Richard Holloway. He didn't ask how the wedding went. He didn't ask where I was. He didn't say congratulations. He asked if I had signed the paperwork yet. "What paperwork?" I said. "The transfer forms," he replied, irritation already creeping into his voice. "For the house. The lawyer needs them today. I told your mother you'd handle it." The house. The same house I had been quietly paying the property taxes on for 3 years. The same house my parents lived in, rent-free, because the title had been placed in my name temporarily after my father's business debts made refinancing impossible. The same house I was now realizing had never truly been mine. I said nothing. He sighed like I was the inconvenience. "Claire, don't do this," he said. "You know how much we're juggling right now. Lily needs support. This isn't the time to be emotional." That was the word he used. Emotional. I hung up without responding. When I finally went home, Aaron was asleep on the couch, still in his dress shirt. I didn't wake him. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the stack of documents I had brought back from my parents' place weeks earlier, the ones I hadn't signed yet, because something about them felt wrong. For the first time, I actually read them. By sunrise, I understood exactly what my role in my family had always been. I wasn't the daughter they loved. I was the solution they used. Growing up, I had been the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who didn't ask for much and fixed problems before they became visible. Lily was different. Lily was bright, impulsive, endlessly forgiven. Every mistake she made was framed as potential. Every boundary she crossed was called creativity. By contrast, my compliance was mistaken for strength. I had covered credit cards, signed guarantor forms, managed accounts, filed extensions, smoothed things over with lawyers and lenders while my parents told everyone how lucky they were to have a responsible child. I believed that was love. Standing in my kitchen, that morning wedding dress pooled at my feet, I realized love had never been part of the equation. Control had. The house documents were the final piece. If I signed them, ownership would shift into a family trust with my parents as permanent residents and Lily as future beneficiary. I would retain liability but lose authority. I would still be responsible. I would no longer be consulted. And they expected me to sign without question. My phone buzzed again. A message from my mother this time. "We didn't mean to hurt you. You understand, right? Lily needed us." There it was. You understand? I understood everything now. I closed the folder, not dramatically, not angrily, just firmly. That was the moment I stopped being the quiet fixer and became something far more dangerous to them. I became someone who read the fine print, and I hadn't even begun to act yet. The morning after my wedding felt unnaturally calm, like the air just before a storm decides which direction to move. Aaron woke up to the sound of me closing drawers. He sat up on the couch, blinking, his hair still pressed flat on one side. "What time is it?" "Early," I said. "Go back to sleep." He didn't. He watched me move through the kitchen with the quiet attention of someone who knows better than to interrupt too soon. I poured coffee I didn't drink. I stacked papers I wasn't done reading. I folded the corner of the house documents with a precision that surprised even me. Finally, he spoke. "They didn't come, did they?" I shook my head once. He nodded slowly, like he had already prepared himself for that answer. Do you want to talk about it?" "Not yet." That was the truth. Talking would have meant softening things. Explaining would have meant justifying. I wasn't ready to do either. Instead, I asked him a question that had been forming in my mind since dawn. "Do you remember when my parents asked me to put the house in my name?" "Yeah," he said. "You said it was temporary." I almost smiled at that. "That's what they said too." Aaron stood and came to the table, looking down at the papers. "Is it not?" I slid one document toward him, tapping the margin with my finger. "Read this part." He did. His brow tightened. He read it again. "This says you're financially responsible, but don't have decision authority," he said carefully. "Yes." And this clause, he added, flipping the page. "This one makes it harder for you to sell or reclaim without their consent." "Yes." He leaned back in the chair, silent now. I watched his face, not for validation, but for clarity. Aaron was not emotional in the way my family accused me of being. He was methodical. If something bothered him, it was because it mattered. "This isn't temporary," he said finally. "This is permanent. They just didn't tell you that part." I nodded. They never do. By mid-morning, the messages started. My mother first, then my father, then Lily. The tone followed a familiar pattern. Confusion, then mild guilt, then irritation. Lily's text was the most direct. "Why are you being weird? Mom says you're upset." It was just bad timing. Bad timing. I stared at the words until they lost meaning. Aaron watched me from across the table. "You don't have to answer." "I know," I said, "but I want to see how far they'll go without me filling the silence." I didn't reply. An hour passed, then another. My father called. I let it ring. Then he texted, "We need those signatures today." "This is important, Claire. Don't complicate things." There it was again. The assumption. The expectation that I would comply quietly the way I always had. I thought back to my childhood, to all the moments that had trained me for this role. The times I was praised not for who I was, but for how little trouble I caused. The way my achievements were acknowledged quickly, then set aside when Lily needed attention. When I got my first promotion at 26, my mother had smiled and said, "That's wonderful, honey," before turning to Lily and asking if she had decided what color scheme she wanted for her living room. I hadn't been angry then, just invisible. Oh. At noon, my father showed up. I hadn't expected that. He stood in the doorway of our apartment, hands in his pockets, wearing the same jacket he always wore when he wanted to look reasonable. Calm, approachable. "Can we talk?" he asked. Aaron glanced at me. I nodded once. My father didn't sit. He paced. "You embarrassed us," he said finally. That was his opening line. "By getting married," I asked. He sighed like I was missing the point on purpose. "By making a fuss. People noticed we weren't there." I noticed too. "That's not fair," he said. "You know Lily's announcement was important. This was her moment. It was my wedding." He stopped pacing and looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing me clearly for the first time might fix everything. "You're always so sensitive," he said. "You read into things." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just asked, "Did you plan to come at all?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "This paperwork," he said, quickly changing direction. "It needs to be signed today. The lawyer's waiting. You can't hold this up." "I can," I said. He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I haven't signed yet." The silence that followed was sharp. "You said you would," he said. I said I'd look at it. "You always do this," he snapped. "You agree, then you hesitate. You create problems." I met his eyes. "I create problems by reading what I'm signing." His jaw tightened. "You're being difficult," he said. "After everything we've done for you." There it was, the debt ledger. The invisible list I was expected to pay off with obedience. "What have you done for me?" I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Aaron shifted beside me but didn't speak. My father straightened his jacket. "This conversation isn't productive. Just sign the papers. We'll talk later." "No," I said. The word landed between us, small and final. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "No." "No. You don't understand what you're risking." "I do," I said calmly. "I've been carrying it for years." He left without another word. That afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I called a lawyer. Her name was Diane Keller. She specialized in property and family trusts. She listened without interrupting while I explained the situation, my voice steady, factual, almost clinical. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Claire," she said, "you're not obligated to proceed with this transfer." "I know, but you are currently exposed," she continued. legally and financially. Your parents have positioned you as a shield. I closed my eyes. That sounds about right. She outlined my options. They were clear. None of them were easy. When I hung up, my hands were trembling. Not from fear, from the realization that for the first time, someone had named what was happening to me without dismissing it. That evening, Lily called. I answered. What is wrong with you? She demanded. Dad says you're holding things up. I'm not holding anything up, I said. I'm stepping back. You can't just do that, she snapped. This affects all of us. That's the point. She laughed sharp and disbelieving. You're overreacting. You always do this when attention isn't on you. I waited until she finished. I'm not signing, I said. Silence. You wouldn't, she said slowly. You always help. Not this time. Her voice dropped. You're selfish. I almost smiled. That word had been coming for years. No, I said. I'm done. I hung up before she could respond. That night, lying in bed beside Aaron, I felt something unfamiliar settle over me. It wasn't relief. It was resolve. And I knew deep down that the moment I refused to sign those papers, I had crossed a line my family would never forgive. The question was no longer whether I could live with that. It was whether I was finally willing to stop living for them. By the third day, the silence had become intentional. My phone sat face down on the kitchen counter, vibrating every so often like a trapped insect. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. I already knew the pattern. When compliance failed, pressure followed. When pressure failed, guilt took its place. And when guilt failed, they escalated. Aaron left for work early that morning. Before he walked out the door, he paused and looked at me the way people do when they're trying not to ask the wrong question. You don't owe anyone a response, he said. I know, I replied. He nodded once and left. I made breakfast I barely touched, then opened my laptop and pulled up the documents again. This time I wasn't reading as a daughter. I was reading as a person who needed to understand exactly where she stood. The house was not just leverage. It was leverage layered with expectation. Utilities in my name, insurance under my policy, property tax withdrawals automated from my account. My parents lived there as if it belonged to them, but legally it was mine, in all the ways that carried risk and none of the ways that carried power. I had been useful. That was the problem. At 10:17 a.m., my and my mother called. I let it ring. At 10:19, she texted, please call me. This is getting out of hand. At 10:26, another message. I don't understand why you're doing this to us. There it was, the quiet rewrite. Not what I was protecting myself from, what I was doing to them. I finally picked up the phone at noon, not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to hear how far the story had already shifted. Her voice broke immediately. Claire, thank God. I didn't respond. We're confused, she continued. Your father is beside himself. Lily hasn't stopped crying. We didn't realize you were this upset. I wasn't upset, I said. I'm clear. She sniffed. You're punishing us. No, I replied. I'm opting out. She went quiet for a moment, recalibrating. You're letting one day ruin everything, she said carefully. One day didn't do this, I answered. It just made it visible. Her tone sharpened. Families don't behave this way. You don't turn your back over paperwork. I closed my eyes. This was never just paperwork. She exhaled sharply. So what, you're going to abandon us now? I noticed she didn't ask how I was. She didn't mention the wedding. She didn't ask why I felt the way I did. She went straight to consequence. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said. I'm stepping out of a role I never agreed to permanently. She lowered her voice the way she used to when I was a child, and she wanted compliance without confrontation. You know we need you right now. There it was, the truth finally spoken. I know, I said. That's why this is happening. She didn't speak for several seconds. When she did, her voice was colder. Your grandmother would be ashamed, she said. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. When logic failed, they reached for legacy. When boundaries appeared, they reached for ghosts. My grandmother taught me to read contracts. Before signing them, I said calmly. She also taught me not to confuse obligation with love. That ended the call. An hour later, Lily showed up. She didn't knock. She buzzed the intercom repeatedly sharp, impatient presses, like she was ringing a service bell. I stood on the other side of the door and listened. Open up, she said through the speaker. We need to talk. I didn't move. Claire, don't be dramatic. Silence. You're acting unhinged, she snapped. Dad is furious. Still silence. Her voice dropped into something almost pleading. You're scaring Mom. That one used to work. The idea that my refusal to comply was hurting someone more fragile than me. It didn't work this time. I watched her through the peephole as she paced the hallway, arms crossed, phone pressed to her ear. She wasn't afraid. She was inconvenienced. Eventually, she left. That afternoon, I met with Diane in person. Her office was small and quiet, the kind of place where people spoke carefully because words had weight there. She reviewed everything I brought page by page without judgment. They assumed you wouldn't resist, she said finally. That's why this is so sloppy. I nodded. They've never had to plan for resistance. She explained my options again, this time more concretely. I could refuse the transfer, I could dissolve my involvement gradually, or I could terminate my responsibility entirely. There will be fallout, she said. I know. She studied me. Most people hesitate at that point. I already lived with the fallout, I replied. I just didn't know it had a name. She didn't smile, but something softened in her expression. If you move forward, she said, they'll try to stop you emotionally. Not legally. Emotionally. I thought of my mother's voice, Lily's accusations, my father's anger. They already are, I said. That evening, Aaron and I sat on the couch, documents spread between us. Are you sure? He asked quietly, not doubting, just making space for honesty. Yes, I said. I'm more sure than I've ever been. He nodded. Then what's next? I picked up one folder and set it aside. This, I said, is where I stop fixing things. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from my father. If you don't sign, you're forcing our hand. I stared at the words for a long moment. Then I typed back one sentence. I'm no longer available for this arrangement. Nothing else. No explanation. No apology. No opening. I set the phone down and felt something shift inside my chest. Not relief, not triumph. Authority? That night, as I lay awake, I realized that something unsettling and freeing all at once. My family wasn't reacting because I was wrong. They were reacting because the system they built around my silence was collapsing, and I was done holding it up. The first letter arrived on a Thursday. It wasn't handwritten. That alone told me everything I needed to know. The envelope was thick cream-colored, addressed in my father's careful block letters. Inside was a single page typed unsigned and folded too precisely. It read like something dictated out loud and written by someone else. Claire, we are deeply concerned about your recent behavior. This situation has escalated unnecessarily and is causing distress to the entire family. We believe you are acting under emotional strain and possibly outside influence. We are asking you as your parents to pause and reconsider before making decisions that could permanently damage relationships. We love you and want what's best for you. Please remember everything we've sacrificed. I read it twice. Not once did it mention my wedding. Not once did it acknowledge the empty chair, the message telling me not to make a scene, or the years of financial responsibility quietly transferred onto my shoulders. It framed my boundary as instability. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, then slid it into a drawer without ceremony. I had learned something important over the last few days. When people feel their control slipping, they don't argue facts. They attack your credibility. That afternoon, Diane called. I wanted to let you know, she said your parents reached out to my office. I didn't respond right away. They didn't ask legal questions, she continued. They asked whether I thought you were under stress. I let out a slow breath. Did you answer? I told them I don't evaluate my client's emotional fitness, she said evenly, and that all decisions so far have been informed and voluntary. Thank you. They won't like that, she added. I know. That evening, Lily posted a photo. She was smiling in it, standing beside our parents at a small restaurant, arms linked, faces close. The caption read, family first. Always. Comments poured in quickly. Heart emojis. Praise. People saying how strong they were, how sad it was that families drifted apart these days. My name wasn't mentioned. That was deliberate. Aaron saw it over my shoulder. Do you want me to say something? No, I said. Let it stand. Because the picture wasn't for me. It was for everyone else. It was proof of unity without accountability. A public version of the story where I was the ungrateful absence. The next escalation came quietly. I noticed it when my bank app sent an alert about a pending change request on one of my accounts. A utility bill. The house. I logged in immediately. Someone had tried to modify the payment authorization. Not successfully, but not accidentally either. I called the utility company and confirmed the attempt had come from an email address I recognized. My mother's. That was when I understood they weren't just panicking. They were scrambling. I changed every password that night. Banking, insurance, utilities. I removed all secondary contacts and froze my credit. Aaron watched silently as I worked. This is the part they don't expect, he said. They expect me to cave, I replied. They don't expect me to secure myself. The next morning, my father showed up again. This time, he wasn't calm. He knocked hard, sharp raps that echoed down the hallway. When I opened the door, he stepped inside without waiting to be invited. What is this? He demanded, holding up his phone. The electric company says they can't talk to us anymore. I closed the door behind him slowly. They shouldn't, I said. It's not your account. His face flushed. You're cutting us off now. I'm separating, I replied. There's a difference. You're trying to control us, he snapped. I almost laughed at that. No, I said. I'm removing myself from being controlled. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. This isn't you, he said. You've changed. Yes, I agreed. I had to. You think you're better than us now, he asked. I met his gaze. I think I'm done being useful at my own expense. That was when his anger cracked into something else. Fear. You don't know what you're doing, he said quietly. You're going to regret this. I didn't respond. Because for the first time, regret wasn't what I was afraid of. He left without another word. That afternoon, Diane sent me an email outlining the next step, a formal notice. Clean, legal, final. It would officially remove me from financial responsibility for the property within a set time frame. This will trigger a response, she wrote. Be prepared. I already was. The response came sooner than expected. My phone rang just after dinner. My mother. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was calm, too calm. We need to talk, she said. Not like this. This is how I'm available now, I replied. She sighed. Your father is unwell. There it was, the final card. What kind of unwell, I asked. Stressed, she said. This is taking a toll. I closed my eyes. Stress is not an emergency. You've always been cold, she snapped, suddenly the softness gone. Even as a child, you never needed us the way Lily did. That sentence landed harder than anything else she could have said. Not because it hurt, but because it explained everything. You're right, I said quietly. I didn't need rescuing, so you gave it to someone else. She didn't respond. I'm moving forward, I added. This is no longer up for discussion. When I hung up, my hands were steady. That night, I signed nothing, but I prepared everything. Because I knew now what Chapter 4 of my life was about. Not confrontation, preparation. And the real consequences were just beginning. The notice went out on Monday. Diane sent it certified return receipt requested. A single envelope, legally neutral, emotionally explosive. It stated in clear language that I was withdrawing from all financial responsibility connected to the Hawthorne Street property within the bounds of the law. It outlined dates, transitions, and consequences. It did not ask for permission. It did not explain why. It simply stated fact. I didn't tell my parents it was coming. I didn't warn Lily. I didn't soften it. For the first time in my life, I let them receive information the way everyone else did, without cushioning. The phone rang less than an hour after the delivery confirmation came through. I didn't answer. Then it rang again. Then again. By evening, I had 12 missed calls and no desire to listen to a single voicemail. Aaron came home to find me sitting at the dining table laptop, open credit reports pulled up side by side. You okay? He asked. I am, I said, and for the first time, I didn't have to convince myself of it. He sat across from me, scanning the screen. This is a lot. It was already a lot, I replied. Now it's just visible. At 8:47 p.m., Lily texted. What did you do? I read it once and set the phone down. A minute later, Mom is crying, Dad is furious, you went too far. Too far. The phrase echoed in my head. I thought of all the moments I had gone too far for them. Paid too much, covered too much, stayed quiet too long. I typed a single response. I made a decision. Nothing else. Her reply came instantly. You don't get to make decisions like this alone? I stared at the screen, then turned it face down. That night, I slept. Deeply, undisturbed. The next morning, I woke to silence. No buzzing phone, no urgent messages, no guilt dressed up as concern. Just quiet. By noon, the silence broke. My father left a voicemail. His voice was controlled, but brittle. This letter you sent. It's inappropriate. You didn't consult us. You don't understand the legal ramifications. We need to meet. All of us. He paused, then added, You've embarrassed us. I deleted the message. Not out of anger, out of clarity. That afternoon, Diane called again. They contacted the landlord, she said. They're trying to renegotiate the lease directly. I almost smiled. They can't. No, she agreed. They can't. But it tells us something. That they're running out of leverage. Yes. The next attempt came through a different channel. My aunt, my mother's sister, called. She hadn't spoken to me in years. Sweetheart, she said warmly, too warmly. Your mother is beside herself. I listened without interrupting. She says you're being influenced, my aunt continued. That this marriage is changing you. I glanced at Aaron, who was reading quietly on the couch. This marriage is stabilizing me, I said. She sighed. Families don't work this way. No, I replied. They shouldn't work the way ours did either. She changed tactics. Your parents might lose the house. I know. Can you live with that? I considered the question. I've lived with worse, I said. The call ended shortly after. That evening, Lily showed up again. This time she didn't buzz. She waited. I saw her through the window, sitting in her car engine, off hands clenched in her lap. For a brief moment, something in me softened. Then I remembered the photo, the caption, the silence at my wedding. I didn't open the door. She left after 20 minutes. The following day, the retaliation became subtler. Mutual friends stopped replying to messages. A coworker asked gently if everything was okay at home. Someone had been talking. The story being told wasn't that I was setting boundaries. It was that I was unstable. I let it circulate, because I knew something they didn't. Truth doesn't need defense forever. Lies do. By the end of the week, Diane confirmed what I had been waiting for. The transition window has started, she said. They're responsible now. Legally. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight shift. What happens next, I asked. They panicked, she said simply. She was right. My mother called that night, her voice stripped of performance. They don't know what to do, she said. Your father doesn't understand the paperwork. Lily can't help. We need time. I didn't answer right away. Claire, she whispered. Please. I took a breath. This isn't about time, I said. It's about responsibility. You've changed, she said, again weaker this time. Yes, I replied. I had to. When I hung up, something settled inside me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was done. Because chapter 5 wasn't about revenge. It was about removal. And without me holding everything together, the cracks were starting to show. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started with small fractures, the kind most people miss unless they've spent years holding something together with their own hands. On Tuesday morning, my phone lit up with a notification from the insurance provider. The homeowner's policy on Hawthorne Street had lapsed. Non-payment, grace period expired. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I archived the message. That policy had been in my name for 3 years. Every month, the premium pulled quietly from my account, another invisible thread tying me to a house I didn't live in, and a family that treated my stability like a utility. I had removed myself from the account the week before. This was the echo. By noon, Diane forwarded me an email from the landlord's office. Formal, polite, direct. They had been unable to reach the occupants. Rent was late. Communication had failed. Next steps would proceed according to the lease. I didn't respond. That was no longer my role. That evening, Lily finally broke character. She didn't text, she didn't call, she sent a voice memo. Her voice came through brittle and uneven like she had rehearsed strength and run out of breath halfway through. You don't get to do this, she said. You don't get to just drop everything and pretend you're the victim. Mom hasn't slept. Dad's blood pressure is up. People are asking questions. A pause, then quieter. You've always been dramatic, but this is cruel. I listened to the entire thing once. Then I deleted it. Not because it didn't sting. Because I recognized the pattern. This wasn't accountability. It was displacement. They were uncomfortable, and discomfort had always been something I was expected to absorb. Not anymore. Aaron noticed the shift before I did. You're lighter, he said that night as we cooked dinner together. I don't feel lighter, I replied. You're steadier, he corrected. That was closer to the truth. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next emergency. I wasn't scanning my phone for a crisis that needed fixing. I wasn't bracing myself for disappointment disguised as obligation. The quiet was unfamiliar, but it wasn't empty. On Thursday, the real panic set in. My father called from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Claire, he said, skipping any greeting. His voice was rough, stripped of authority. We need to talk. Now. I said nothing. They're talking about eviction, he continued. The landlord. This has gone too far. This is what the paperwork said, I replied. You could stop this, he said quickly. Just make a call. Explain. It was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. A sharp inhale. You're really going to let this happen? I looked out the window at the quiet street below our apartment, at a woman walking her dog, at a life that felt oddly untouched by my family's chaos. I'm not letting anything happen, I said. I'm letting it proceed. You owe us, he snapped. There it was again. The debt. I've already paid, I replied. He went silent. For a moment, I thought he might say something different, something real. Instead, he said, Your sister can't handle this. I closed my eyes. She was never meant to, I said softly. Neither was I. He hung up. That night, I sat alone in the living room long after Aaron had gone to bed. I thought about the years I had mistaken endurance for love, about how being dependable had slowly erased my right to be considered. I remembered my grandmother's house, the way she used to sit at the kitchen table with her paperwork spread out, reading every line twice. People who rush you, she once told me, don't want fairness. They want access. I hadn't understood that then. I did now. The next morning, Lily showed up at my workplace. That was new. I saw her through the glass doors of the lobby, pacing phone pressed to her ear, hair pulled back too tightly. She looked smaller somehow, less polished. When I stepped outside, she spun around. Are you proud of yourself? She demanded. I didn't answer. They're going to lose the house, she continued. Where do you think they're supposed to go? I studied her face. The panic there wasn't about our parents. Not really. It was about structure, about the safety net tearing. You could help, she said. You always help. I'm not, I replied. Her eyes flashed. You think you're better than us now? No, I said. I think I'm done being beneath you. She laughed sharp and hollow. You're cold. I'm clear, I said. She stepped closer. This is going to follow you. People will know what you did. I met her gaze. People already know who you are. That stopped her. For a second, just a second, something like doubt crossed her face. Then it hardened. You'll regret this, she said. I nodded once. Maybe, but not the way you think. She left without another word. By the end of the week, the house on Hawthorne Street was no longer a family home. It was a liability, and for the first time, it wasn't mine. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I felt something quieter and deeper. Freedom doesn't always feel like relief. Sometimes it feels like standing still while everything you used to carry finally falls to the ground. And chapter 6 wasn't the explosion they expected. It was the unraveling they could no longer stop. The notice was taped to the front door on a Friday morning. I didn't see it myself. I didn't need to. I knew the timing because my phone started ringing at 7:04 a.m., and this time it wasn't just my parents. It was everyone. My aunt again, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, an old family friend from church. People who had never checked in on me suddenly felt qualified to intervene. Their messages piled up without asking permission, each one carrying the same theme, wrapped in different voices. What kind of daughter lets this happen? This is extreme, Claire. You've made your point. Isn't that enough? I turned the phone face down and finished my coffee. Aaron watched me from across the kitchen. Do you want me to stay home today? No, I said. Go. This is the part I need to sit with. After he left, the apartment felt very still. Around mid-morning, the call finally came from my mother. I answered this one. Her voice sounded older than I remembered. Not fragile, tired. They posted a notice, she said. We have 30 days. I didn't respond. Your father is angry, she continued. Lily is frantic. Everyone keeps asking what we're going to do. She paused, waiting for me to fill the silence. I didn't. We never thought you'd go this far, she said quietly. I didn't either, I replied. I never thought you'd leave me standing alone on my wedding day. That landed. She inhaled sharply, then exhaled. We didn't mean for it to hurt you. I know, I said. You just didn't think it mattered? Her voice cracked then, just slightly. We did our best. I believe you, I said. And I meant it. It just wasn't enough. There was no argument after that. No accusations. No guilt. Just a long, hollow silence where something might have been repaired years ago, if anyone had tried. When the call ended, I felt heavier for a moment. Not with doubt, with grief. That afternoon, Diane emailed me an update. Formal proceedings had begun. I was officially removed from financial responsibility. Any further communication would be directed to the occupants. I closed the laptop and sat back. It was done. Not dramatically, not loudly. Done. The next shift came faster than I expected. 2 days later, a video appeared online. Someone from the neighborhood had filmed the sheriff's car parked outside the Hawthorne Street house. It wasn't an eviction yet, just paperwork being served, but the implication was enough. The clip made its way through group chats, through church circles, through the same social channels my family had used to showcase Unity days earlier. This time, the comments weren't hearts. They were questions. What happened? I thought Claire owned that house. Why isn't Lily helping? That was when Lily called. Her voice was tight, stripped of its usual confidence. Did you see it? She asked. Yes, I said. This is humiliating, she snapped. People are talking. I know. You could stop this, she said again, like repetition might make it true. Just talk to the landlord. Explain. I already did, I replied. I explained that I was done. Her breath hitched. You're destroying us. I leaned back against the couch. No, I stopped protecting you from reality. You're enjoying this, she accused. That was new. No, I said. I'm enduring it. Silence. Then quieter. I don't know how to fix this. I closed my eyes. For once I said that's not my job. She hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, Aaron came home and found me sitting on the floor of the living room, back against the couch, surrounded by nothing. No papers, no phone, no distractions. You okay? He asked. It's sleep-obsessed. I think so, I said. I think this is what letting go actually feels like. He sat beside me, shoulder touching mine. You didn't ruin them, he said gently. I know, I replied. They just don't know how to stand without me. By the end of the week, my parents had packed boxes. I knew because my mother texted once, a photo attached. Cardboard stacked in the hallway. No caption. I looked at it for a long time. Then I deleted it because the truth had finally settled into something solid. I hadn't taken anything from them. I had taken myself back. And whatever came next would no longer be built on my silence. The quiet after the boxes appeared was different from the silence that came before. It wasn't tense. It wasn't waiting to be filled. It felt like a pause the world takes after something irreversible has already happened. For 3 days, no one called. No accusations, no guilt. No last-minute attempts to renegotiate what had already been decided. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner with Aaron and talked about ordinary things. Groceries, a leaky faucet, a movie we might watch on Sunday. My life continued in small, unremarkable ways, and that was how I knew something fundamental had changed. The chaos was no longer centered on me. On the 4th day, my father left another voicemail. It wasn't angry. That was what unsettled me most. His voice sounded hollow, stripped of command, like a man speaking from a place he didn't recognize. We're staying with your cousin Mark for now, he said. Just temporary. Temporary. The word tasted familiar. He cleared his throat. Your mother wanted me to tell you. She hopes you're doing well. That was all. No demand, no instruction, no veiled threat. I didn't call back, not because I wanted to punish him, but because the call wasn't an invitation. It was an update, and updates didn't require a response. Later that afternoon, Diane called with another piece of information I hadn't expected. There's something else you should be aware of, she said. I sat down at the kitchen table. What is it? Your parents attempted to access funds from the trust account last year, she explained. Not successfully, but the request was logged. I closed my eyes slowly. They never mentioned it, I said. No, she replied. They wouldn't have needed to. They assumed you wouldn't notice. It was a strange feeling, learning about a betrayal that no longer hurt. Not because it wasn't real, because I was already free of it. That evening, Lily called again. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Her voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. Not frantic this time. Not sharp. Tired. I don't know where to start, she said. I leaned against the counter and listened. Mom's barely eating. Dad keeps talking about how unfair this all is. Mark says we can't stay long. People keep asking me questions I don't know how to answer. She paused, waiting. I didn't rush her. They keep looking at me, she continued, like I'm supposed to fix it. I almost smiled at the irony. I can't, she said quietly. I don't know how. I took a breath. I know. That was when it finally clicked for her. You did, she said slowly. Yes, I replied. Silence stretched between us, heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I thought you liked being the strong one, she said. I considered that. I learned to survive it, I said. That's not the same thing. Her voice cracked then, just slightly. I didn't realize how much you were holding. I didn't either, I admitted. For the first time in my life, she didn't rush to fill the space. She didn't defend herself. She didn't pivot the conversation back to her needs. She just sat with it. I don't know who I am without everyone catching me, she said. I closed my eyes. That part I said gently is yours to figure out. She didn't ask me to help. That was new. When the call ended, I felt something shift again, subtle but important. Not forgiveness, recognition. That night, Aaron and I sat on the balcony as the sun dipped behind the buildings across the street. The air was warm, the kind that carries sound farther than usual. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed. A dog barked. Life moved forward. Do you feel guilty, he asked. I thought about it. I feel sad, I said. For what could have been, for what never was. But not guilty, no, I replied. Because guilt assumes wrongdoing, and all I did was stop lying about what I could carry. He nodded. By the end of the week, the house on Hawthorne Street was officially vacated. I learned that through a neighbor, not my family. They had left quietly, taking what they could fit into borrowed cars, leaving behind the illusion of permanence they'd rested on for years. No one asked me where they should go. No one asked me what I thought. For once, my absence was respected. And in that space, something unexpected happened. I slept better. I breathed deeper. I stopped flinching at my phone. Chapter 8 wasn't about closure. It was about adjustment. The world reorganizing itself after I stepped out of the center. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because whatever it would be built without my silence as its foundation. The first holiday without them was Thanksgiving. It crept up on me quietly, like something pretending not to matter until it suddenly did. At work, people asked the usual questions. Who was hosting? How far I was traveling? What dish I was bringing? I answered vaguely, then stopped answering altogether. I didn't want to explain the shape of my family to people who expected neat edges. Aaron noticed before I did. You've been quieter, he said one evening as we walked through the grocery store. I didn't think I cared about holidays, I admitted. Turns out I cared about the performance of them. We decided to stay home. No travel, no obligations, just us. The morning of Thanksgiving, I woke up early out of habit, my body still trained to anticipate demands that no longer existed. The apartment was quiet. Light filtered in through the blinds. For the first time in years, the day belonged to me. I checked my phone once. There was a message from Lily. Happy Thanksgiving. Just that. No guilt, no request, no subtext I could detect. I stared at it for a moment, then replied, You too. That was all. Later, as Aaron and I cooked together, I thought about the holidays of my childhood. How my mother would orchestrate everything, assigning roles without asking. How Lily was always given something light and decorative while I handled logistics, groceries, timing, cleanup. I had been so busy making things work that I rarely remembered what it felt like to enjoy them. This time there was no script. The turkey took longer than expected. The sides didn't all come out at once. We laughed about it. Nothing collapsed. In the afternoon, my phone rang. My father. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed. His voice sounded restrained, careful. We just wanted to say Happy Thanksgiving. We're figuring things out. That phrase again, figuring things out. I didn't call back, because figuring things out was something people did for themselves. That evening after dinner, I sat on the couch with my feet tucked under me, a warm plate balanced on my lap. The TV murmured softly in the background. Aaron dozed beside me, and for the first time I felt something I hadn't expected. Loneliness. Not sharp, not overwhelming, just present. I let it exist without trying to fix it. Loneliness. I was learning wasn't always a sign you'd made the wrong choice. Sometimes it was the echo left behind when you stopped crowding yourself out. 2 weeks later, something else surfaced. A letter from my grandmother's attorney. She had passed earlier that year before the wedding, before everything unraveled. The timing had felt cruel then. I hadn't had space to grieve her properly. I opened the envelope slowly, my hands steady. The letter was formal. There had been a revision to her will. I read the sentence twice, then a third time. My name appeared where I hadn't expected it, not as a shared beneficiary, as the sole executor, and the primary heir to a small trust she had kept separate from the rest of the family assets. My breath caught. I read on. The letter explained that my grandmother had made the change quietly after observing patterns of dependency and expectation within the family. She had left instructions that the trust was to be disclosed to no one until after the house on Hawthorne Street was no longer under my responsibility. My chest tightened. She had known. I sat there for a long time, the letter resting in my hands like something fragile. She hadn't intervened. She hadn't warned me. She had prepared. That night I told Aaron. He listened, eyes thoughtful. She trusted you. She protected me, I said softly, in the only way she could. The trust wasn't large. It wouldn't change my life overnight. But it represented something far more important. Someone had seen me clearly. The next call from Lily came 2 days later. She sounded different. They know about the trust, she said. I closed my eyes. How? Dad found something in Grandma's papers, she replied. He thinks you manipulated her. I exhaled slowly. What do you think? I asked. There was a pause. I think she knew what she was doing, Lily said quietly. That was the first time she had ever said something like that. The call ended shortly after. I didn't feel victorious. I felt validated. Chapter 9 wasn't about inheritance. It was about confirmation. Confirmation that the imbalance I had lived under wasn't imagined. That someone had seen it, named it, and quietly given me a way out. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt something like peace settle in my chest. Not because things were fixed, but because the truth had finally stopped being mine alone. The lawyer my grandmother had chosen was not the kind of man who wasted words. His name was Thomas Reed, late 60s, crisp suit, eyes that missed nothing. We sat across from each other in his office, the trust documents spread neatly between us. Aaron sat beside me, quiet and steady, letting me take the lead. Your grandmother was very specific, Thomas said. She anticipated resistance. I nodded. From my family. Yes. He slid one page forward as she instructed that no funds be released to anyone but you. No loans, no exceptions. She also anticipated attempts to pressure you. That made my throat tighten. She left this clause. He continued tapping the page because she believed you would be asked to rescue people who refused to change. I let out a slow breath. She didn't want that to be possible. Thomas leaned back slightly. She also named you executor because she believed you would follow her instructions even if it made you unpopular. That was the part that stayed with me. Unpopular. I had spent my entire life trying not to be that. After the meeting, Aaron and I sat in the car for a moment before driving away. You okay? He asked. Yes, I said. I just realized something. What? I've been confusing peace with approval. That evening, the messages started again. My father, this time, carefully worded. We need to discuss your grandmother's estate. There may have been a misunderstanding. Then my mother. She would have wanted the family taken care of. Then Lily. You don't deserve everything. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded the messages to Thomas. He replied with one sentence. Do not engage. Let me handle it. The next week unfolded like a slow reveal. My father contacted Thomas directly. My mother left messages for the trust office. Lily posted vague quotes online about betrayal and greed. None of it reached me directly. That was new. One afternoon, Thomas called. They're contesting the will, he said. I closed my eyes. I expected that. It won't go far, he added. Your grandmother was meticulous. This will cost them more than it's worth. I thought of all the times I had absorbed cost, so they wouldn't have to. Let them, I said. A few days later, Lily showed up at my apartment again. This time she looked tired. Not frantic, not angry. Just worn down. I don't want to fight, she said quietly. I didn't invite her in. We stood in the hallway, the door open behind me. What do you want? I asked. She swallowed. I want you to help Mom and Dad, just a little. They're struggling. I studied her face. And you? I asked. She hesitated. I don't know. There it was. I'm not doing that, I said. She flinched. So that's it. You're choosing money over family. I shook my head. I'm choosing boundaries over control. She scoffed softly. You sound like a therapist. I sound like someone who's done being erased. She looked at me for a long moment. I don't recognize you, she said. That's because you never really saw me, I replied. She left without another word. That night, Aaron asked if I was afraid. Of what I asked. Of them cutting you off completely. I considered it. They already did, I said. They just didn't realize it until I stopped paying. By the end of the month, the will contest was officially dismissed. Thomas called with the update. It's over, he said. You're free? I thanked him and hung up. Free. The word felt strange in my mouth. Because freedom didn't come with applause. It came with quiet. And in that quiet, I realized Chapter 10 wasn't about money. It was about authority. For the first time in my life, My decisions didn't require permission. And I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I was done negotiating my worth. Christmas arrived without warning. The decorations appeared overnight in shop windows and office lobbies, the music slipping into elevators and grocery aisles as if nothing in the world had changed. I felt it in my body before I acknowledged it with my mind. A tightening, an old reflex. For years, December had meant logistics, coordinating schedules, buying gifts no one really wanted, managing emotions no one else felt responsible for. I used to think that was what being an adult looked like. This year, the calendar was empty. Aaron asked once gently, "Do you want to do anything?" I thought about it. "I want it to be quiet," I said, so we kept it quiet. We put up a small tree, undecorated except for a single string of white lights. No family dinner, no obligations disguised as tradition, just warmth, food, and the comfort of choosing what stayed and what didn't. On Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "We're thinking of you tonight." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because it moved me, because I was finally able to see it clearly. There was no apology, no accountability, just a statement designed to reopen a door without knocking. I didn't reply. An hour later, another message came through, this one from my father. "Family should come together at Christmas." I turned the phone face down. Aaron watched me carefully. "You don't have to answer." "I know," I said, "and I won't." Later that night, I sat alone in the living room while Aaron slept, the tree lights casting soft shadows on the wall. I thought about all the Christmases I had spent feeling tired without knowing why. How I'd always assumed exhaustion was part of the season. It wasn't. Exhaustion was the cost of being needed but never cherished. 2 days after Christmas, Lily called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this call would be different. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Not defensive. Not sharp. "They're not doing well," she said. I didn't respond. "I don't think I realized how much you did," she continued. "I thought things just worked." "They worked because I made them work," I said calmly. She was silent. "I don't know how to fix this," she admitted. I closed my eyes. "You don't fix it by handing it back to me." She exhaled shakily. "Then what do I do?" "That's the question I had to answer," I said, and no one helped me. Another pause. "I'm scared," she said. I believed her. But fear wasn't enough. "I hope you figure it out," I said. "I really do." She didn't argue. She didn't accuse. She just said, "Okay," and that was it. When the call ended, I felt something unexpected. Not relief, closure. Not because everything was resolved, but because I finally understood something essential. My family didn't miss me. They missed my function. And once I stopped performing, there was nothing left for them to negotiate. At the end of the year, Aaron and I took a short trip out of town. Nothing elaborate. Just a cabin near the lake, snow falling quietly outside while we sat by the fire and talked about the future. Real future plans, not the contingency plans. Not backup plans for other people's failures. One night, as we watched the fire die down, Aaron asked, "Do you think they'll ever change?" I considered the question carefully. "I think they'll adapt," I said. "Change requires reflection. Adaptation only requires survival." "And you?" he asked. "I already changed," I replied. I stopped confusing love with obligation. Chapter 11 wasn't about reconciliation. It was about acceptance. Accepting that some relationships only exist as long as you keep giving. Accepting that stepping away doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. And honesty, I was learning, was the most expensive boundary of all, but it was worth every cost. The year turned without ceremony. No countdown, no resolutions shouted into the dark. Just a quiet morning where the light came in soft through the blinds and the world felt stable. That was new. I woke up before Aaron lay still for a moment and listened to the sound of our apartment breathing around us. Pipes settling, heat clicking on. Ordinary things that used to feel temporary when my life was organized around everyone else's emergencies. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. I didn't check my phone right away. When I finally did, there were no missed calls, no messages, no crises waiting to be solved. The absence felt intentional now, not fragile. Over the next few weeks, the final threads loosened on their own. My parents stopped reaching out altogether. Not dramatically, not angrily. They simply redirected their energy elsewhere toward relatives who could offer sympathy without boundaries. Through distant channels, I heard they were still angry, still confused, still convinced they'd been wronged, but the story no longer required my participation to continue. Lily sent one last message in February. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a demand. It was just a sentence. "I'm trying to figure things out on my own." I read it once. Then I replied, "I hope you do." And that was the end of it. I didn't block her. I didn't make a declaration. I just didn't step back into the space she used to leave open for me. The trust my grandmother left sat quietly in the background of my life. I didn't touch it right away. I didn't need to. Knowing it existed was enough. It wasn't money to me, it was proof. Proof that someone had seen the pattern long before I named it. Proof that I wasn't imagining the imbalance. Proof that my silence had never been consent. One afternoon, months later, I drove past Hawthorne Street without meaning to. I took a wrong turn after a meeting and ended up at the corner where the old house stood. Someone else lived there now. Different car, different curtains, the porch light fixed. Life had moved on. I pulled over for a moment and sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, feeling the weight of what used to be mine lift completely. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt finished. At home that evening, Aaron asked what I'd been thinking about. The version of me who thought being needed was the same as being loved, I said. He smiled softly. She worked really hard. She did, I agreed. She just didn't know she was allowed to stop. Our marriage grew in the quiet aftermath of everything. Not louder, not flashier, stronger. We made decisions without scanning for fallout. We planned holidays without bracing for disappointment. We talked about buying a home one day, not as a rescue plan for anyone else, but as a place to build something that belonged to us alone. Sometimes late at night, I still thought about my wedding day. The empty chair, the message telling me not to make a scene. The moment I walked forward anyway. I used to think that was the day my family abandoned me. Now I understood something different. That was the day I stopped abandoning myself. Revenge doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like paperwork signed calmly. Sometimes it looks like silence that refuses to be broken. Sometimes it looks like letting people face the consequences you've been shielding them from for years. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't explain. I simply withdrew my labor, my credit, my stability, my silence. And without those things, the illusion collapsed on its own. That was the real turning point. Not when they panicked. Not when the house was lost. Not when the will was contested. But when I realized I didn't need their understanding to move forward. Only my own. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love that requires self-erasure isn't love. Family that only functions when one person carries the weight isn't family. And boundaries aren't punishments. They're acknowledgments of reality. I didn't win by taking something from them. I won by taking myself back. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who held everything together while being told it was no big deal, I'd like to know. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what choosing yourself would look like in your life. And if you want more stories like this, stories about truth karma and the moment the tables finally turn, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me. Some silences are endings. Others are beginnings. This one was mine.